Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this clown decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better, and if you want to keep up with all things clown decade, do subscribe to the channel and do become a member. Anyway, today we're once again going to be covering Palestine Action, where MPs overwhelmingly backed the decision to add the direct action group, or as obviously John McDonnell liked to say,
if we have to, close off Parliament Square with thousands of people turning up, close off Westminster Bridge, get out into the streets in form of direct action and demonstrate there's more to democracy than just a vote every 5 years. Democracy is about taking control of your own community, and that means industrial action combined with direct action. We used to call it insurrection, now we're polite and say it's direct action.
Yeah, pretty much every communist is open about this. All they really mean is insurrection or revolution by direct action. Anyway, back to the article. They will be added to a list, Palestine Action I mean, of terrorist groups alongside Al-Qaeda, Islamic State and Hamas, which a few people might call quite harsh. Well, at the end of the day, these people have injured and actually used violence against police officers and security staff at production facilities for military hardware, and of course also directly attacked an RAF base, which is one of the most humiliating attacks I think the RAF has ever endured, given it was two morons on e-scooters. If approved by the House of Lords on Thursday, Palestine Action will become a prescribed terror group on Friday, which will make it illegal to be a member or to invite support for the organisation, punishable by up to 14 years in prison. And it's pretty much guaranteed to go through, because quite obviously you cannot be seen as a serious country while having your RAF bases, or any Air Force base if you're in another country, attacked and do absolutely nothing about the group that planned said attack. On Friday, the High Court will hear last-minute injunction application from Palestine Action to try and suspend the move. The group of Labour MPs, including the veteran left-winger Diane Abbott, Clive Lewis and Richard Bergen, who served in Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet, were some of those who decided to not prescribe Palestine Action, but obviously they lost overwhelmingly. Corbyn, who sits as an independent, also voted against to prescribe Palestine Action, along with fellow independent John McDonnell, his former shadow chancellor. I didn't even realise he was still an MP, but there we go. Because at the end of the day, they are for violent revolution, although they've obviously realised with Extinction Rebellion and the rest of the climate lot, not actually directly being violent towards people actually is quite helpful. However, being directly violent against institutions, buildings, causing criminal damage, that does actually help your cause, it seems, or at the very least it got stupid net zero policy through. Anyway, the full list of names of people who voted against it are here. Obviously in Labour it's Diane Abbott, Tahir Ali, Richard Bergen, as we already heard, Clive Lewis and Nadia Whittamy. Obviously basically every person you'd expect to vote against this voted against this because they all hate Britain. Surprisingly, some of the Lib Dems did as well. Who even knows who the Lib Dems are? They'll largely be doing it on a free speech basis, because when it comes to free speech with the Lib Dems, it only applies to Britain's enemies, not to British people themselves. The Greens obviously all voted against it because they are all absolutely mad, but we'll go into detail on Carla Denyer in a bit. And then some independents, including Zarah Sultana, Shoktak Adam, Adnan Hussein, and obviously Jeremy Corbyn and McDonnell. And then an SDLP candidate as well. I don't know who they are, but I think they're over in Northern Ireland. Basically, who you have on this list is everyone you would expect to be, plus some Lib Dems, because for some reason free speech only matters when it comes to Britain's enemies, as I say. So, hundreds of Palestine Action activists shouted "Death, death to the IDF," a reference to the Israeli Defence Forces. Thank you for that. As 18 of its members appeared in court on Monday. They're accused of storming the UK base of the Israeli arms firm Elbit Systems in August last year. No, they're not just accused of it, they showed that off too. Activists allegedly used a repurposed prison van to smash through the fence and smashed equipment inside with sledgehammers. 2 police officers and security guard were injured at the factory on the outskirts of Bristol, which, as I say, they do use violence. So all this stuff about, oh, they just use spray paint, they're just doing mild property damage, it's nonsense. They attack people too, so they're not quite as didn't do nothing as Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil. Protesters clutched signs reading "Free the Filton 18" and "Hands off Gaza" outside Woolwich Crown Court in South East London as Mr Justice Jeremy Johnson opened the 2 days of legal argument before 3 separate trials for the 18 defendants began in November. And obviously this once again is just goading a pure reaction. I think we've all seen the Glastonbury clips by this point.
Alright, but have you heard this one though? Death, death to the IDF! Death, death to the IDF! Death, death to the IDF!
Which I hear a lot of argumentation that effectively boils down to, well, the IDF are a military force, and therefore it should be free speech to say this. The problem you have is that it's, again, one of the most obvious Motte and Baileys in the world. It's a bit like the whole from the river to the sea. It's just, oh, the Palestinians just want freedom within Israel. Obviously, that just ignores the fact that something like, I don't know, 20% of Israel is actually Palestinian, and they do have rights. But it's obvious because that is the larger war cry of destroy basically all of Israel and the Jews between the river and the sea, which is obviously where Israel is. And so effectively when they are chanting death, death to the IDF, they're effectively saying the same thing. As I say, it's the most obvious Motte and Bailey in the world. And then you have everyone in Palestine Action chanting the same thing. Very little of this actually has to do with caring about the lives of the Palestinian people. And for a lot of people, they are very low information on the actual war. Again, I don't particularly care too much. But to me, it was very obvious that these chants very rarely actually mean what they say. That became very obvious the day after October 7th, where similar chants to these were being chanted in celebration of a whole load of innocent Jews dying in Israel. I suppose it's also worth noting that while this did get the vast majority of the newspaper's attention, this Bob villain was also chanting a song that said, "I heard you want your country back, shut the F up," which is obviously a bit of a go at you and me. But this is a video about Palestine Action, which obviously involves the war in Israel, so that's why we're focusing on that. Anyway, it's also fair to point out that Palestine Action also use classic Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion tactics, where two Palestine Action activists were arrested on Tuesday after blockading the entrance to an Israeli arms company's British headquarters. The group, which is seen to be prescribed as a terrorist organisation, said on Tuesday that activists were successfully disrupting the Elbit Systems in Bristol. By the way, for those who don't know, Elbit Systems is Israeli owned, having blocked the only entrance and covered it in red paint to symbolise Palestinian blood. Again, very similar to how Extinction Rebellion worked, how Just Stop Oil worked. The problem with Palestine Action is that they're actually breaking into places and then threatening police officers and security guards and actually injuring them too, which actually puts them on a level above their scumminess when it comes to Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil comparisons. And those more violent actions should have got them prescribed ages ago when they did it, not just now when they've actually attacked part of the state apparatus. Anyway, I think it's about time we started looking into how these people who voted against the proscription of Palestine Action were debating in Parliament. So I think we'll go to the biggest outcrier of this massive justice, though obviously they'd call it an injustice, with Zarah Sultana. Please let us know what your arguments were.
Deputy Speaker, this is an unprecedented and dangerous overreach of the state. Never before in Britain has it been a crime to simply support a group. This order lumps a non-violent network of students, nurses, teachers, firefighters and peace campaigners, ordinary people, my constituents and yours.
Okay, do you not think that these people could support a terrorist group in the abstract? You know who else were nurses, doctors, firefighters, etc.? Nazis. The Nazis had some very famous doctors, in fact, very involved with the ideology.
With neo-Nazi militias and mass casualty cults.
Well, I suppose at the very least, at least she understands ISIS as a mass murdering cult. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how big or small the group is. If they have attacked people for political ends, that is terrorism. They have done that. Okay, this is happening directly as a result of the RAF attack. And believe it or not, I'd argue that anyone attacking our own military is probably an enemy of the country.
Palestine Action's real crime, we have to be clear, is shutting down Elbit Systems sites that arm the Israeli military. Its true offence has been audacious enough to expose the blood-soaked ties between this government and the genocidal Israeli apartheid state. Yeah,
you can't have a group that is shutting down British businesses, regardless if they're foreign owned. You know, fine, we put sanctions on Russian businessmen, sure. It's still really in debate if that was a mistake or not, but obviously we're going through with keeping a lot of those sanctions. And the thing with Israel is that they're an ally, and are going to remain an ally. Now, if you want to argue they shouldn't be an ally, that's absolutely fine, but let's be absolutely clear. Attacking businesses as they are related or incorporated by allied governments is obviously going to get you on the naughty list. Come on. Anyway, the speech goes into an awful lot of the typical arguments you'd also see from this. It's largely repeating itself, to be honest. Effectively making the argument why they considered terrorists if Israel are attacking Gaza and flattening the damn thing. Isn't that terrorism? To which my reply is, no, October 7th was terrorism. Anyway, she ends the speech with this.
I oppose the blood-soaked hands of this government trying to silence us. So I say this loudly and proudly on Wednesday the 2nd of July, 2025, we are all Palestine. Order!
Yeah, like most people, they are either full-on Islamists or they are effectively virtue signalers. Basically, everyone in Palestine Action is a virtue signaler. I don't think it's some Hamas-controlled group, though I would not be shocked if Iran are throwing money at the damn thing. But largely these arguments were shared by other people opposing this bill. Richard Bergen said, "In Parliament tonight I voted against prescribing Palestine Action as terrorists. Our country has a long tradition of people using non-violent direct action to oppose war." I suppose that's why they injured 2 policemen and a security guard. Like the Greenham Common Women. UN experts and Amnesty have urged the government not to do this. I don't care. Those are 2 institutions that are probably 20 to 30 years out of date. I don't even know what they were like in the 90s. They could have been out of date then. But in 2025, after Trump won, yeah, I don't think so. Not relevant. Adnan Hussein, one of the independent Gaza MPs, also had some complaints about Palestine Action becoming terrorists.
Can I just put on record that this heavy-handed approach threatens basic freedoms and sets a dangerous precedent for all political dissent in the UK? Does he acknowledge that?
Minister.
I don't acknowledge that, and I don't accept his characterisation of the decision that we have taken.
Thank you, Dan Jarvis. Yes, quite a common argument you'd see quite a lot when the right wing were arguing for free speech was effectively, oh, well, words are violence, etc, etc, etc. If you feel uncomfortable in ways that's worse than violence, and then also, obviously, oh, you just want to give literal Nazis free speech. Well, at the moment, we literally have pictures of Hitler flying about in London during Saturday marches, chants that are literally making Jewish people uncomfortable on Saturdays in London, and well, some Jews also take them as direct violent threats. Has anything been done about this? No, absolutely not. Do the left care to make any sort of concession on that front? No, absolutely not. It's the classic thing of free speech for me, but not for thee. I'm not having it. There are obviously good reasons for not allowing support of a group that is directly attacking British military assets and directly attacking property on British soil and even injuring our police officers and security guards. Amazing the things that these people will defend while complaining about many, many infringements of these principles they apparently have from the other side. Anyway, Carla Denyer had a bit of a speech on this as well.
I am absolutely furious. The government brought a motion for voting on today to proscribe 3 organisations. 2 are clearly fascist, terrorist organisations that should be proscribed.
For those interested, the 2 groups banned that are apparently white supremacists are Maniacs Murder Cult. Okay, I don't have much problem with that. And Russian Imperial Movement. I don't really know details on either of these movements, but according to the Times, the Maniacs Murder Cult is a neo-Nazi transnational and predominantly online organisation that has claimed a number of violent attacks around the world. Okay, fair enough, ban him. And the Russian Imperial Movement is an ethno-nationalist group that aims to create a new Russian imperial state. Its paramilitary units fought alongside Russian forces in the invasion of Ukraine. It's also run a paramilitary training programme to support attendees to carry out terrorist attacks, the Home Office added. Fine, ban him, that's good. But obviously we have an issue with the one that's actually operating rather largely in the UK and is directly attacking our own assets, along with actual police officers. Funny how that detail gets ignored.
The third is a civil disobedience organisation, Palestine Action.
Man, these groups keep going on and being civilly disobedient, breaking our laws. Do you think we should do something about it? No, it's rightful protest. Honestly, I hate left-wingers so much.
It is very clear to me that 2 of these organisations clearly meet the criteria for being proscribed, and the third does not.
Well, at least this is already a more interesting argument than the ones we've been through so far. Please tell me why, Carla.
but because of the cynical lumping together of these three organisations into a single vote by the government, us MPs who wanted to proscribe the MMC and the RAM were prevented from doing so.
I mean, let's be fair, you weren't, but let's also be fair, there is nobody on the planet that thinks that you are pro-white supremacist terrorist. Come on. And let's be real, what's the big reason for this? It's nothing to do with what they have or haven't done. You don't care about any of that. You just care about the cause. Because at the end of the day, the worst for these types of hypocrisies are definitely the far left. The far right do it too, don't get me wrong, but hypocrisies are abound with the far left like this. And they're also incredibly low information. The idea that you can call a group that injures and threatens policemen and security guards is absolutely ridiculous. The fact you can say that doing £7 million of damage to an airplane that is a military asset is just civil disobedience, it's ridiculous. Of course they were asking for this type of reaction. It's called F around and find out. It's a very basic cause and effect reality.
Because we could not vote to erode democracy and the freedom of speech and the rich tradition of civil disobedience in this country.
If you actually bother to look into the history of civil disobedience, we've basically never tolerated it. You know, I am in no way advocating this, but, you know, Peterloo was a whole massacre because of civil disobedience. The suffragettes are actually a bad example because they were actually terrorists who got people killed. But we absolutely did not stand for them. They also turn out to be fascists as well, isn't that funny? You know, the thing is that these people would be the type to say the IRA should not be prescribed terrorists. I would not be shocked if they came out with that opinion. And I wouldn't be bothered by these people if they weren't in Parliament voting on our laws. But that very much bothers me, and it bothers me I know people who are probably quite on board with this, but they get fed so much misinformation that they can't actually have or form an informed opinion on it. And then obviously when you try and give them that information, their head just rejects it because they literally cannot think, oh, I've literally been supporting an actual terrorist organisation who actually injured people. Oh, they weren't innocent, they were security guards and policemen. You should still obviously not be injuring people for doing their job, which is to kick you out of these places and arrest you for committing crimes.
I do not agree with everything that Palestine Action has said or done. Indeed, I condemn the comments that one of the co-founders of Palestine Action made shortly after the 7th of October.
I have literally no idea what was said, but if you think they are being put on this terror list because of things they've said, I don't know what the hell you've been reading or what you've been told.
But it is extremely clear to me that the actions and the intent of Palestine Action are perfectly adequately dealt with by existing criminal law, and their actions fall far, far short of the rightly high bar that is set for the definition of a terrorist organisation.
You don't think directly attacking people and directly attacking state assets to sabotage them is enough to put them on the terrorist list? I don't know what else to tell you. Gláeddyv is the type of person where if she found out what her homeland was, would probably want them on the terrorist list, by the way. I'm just throwing that out there. Anyway, Corbyn was another person who was in Parliament outraged that we would even consider putting people who attack state assets and attacked British citizens to further a political agenda have been put on the terrorist watch list.
Could I ask the Minister if he would think carefully of the contributions made today by the member for New Forest East, Liverpool, Riverside and Brighton concerning naming somebody as a terrorist when they're in fact people that are protesting about the appalling events that are going on in Gaza?
Yeah, blah blah blah, same stuff. If he says anything interesting, I'll leave it clipped in. Otherwise, you know what he says.
Can't we deal with the fundamental issue, which is the illegal activities of the Israeli Defence Force in both those scenarios?
Again, it's an argument I've made for years, but I'll touch upon it again anyway. I just find it very difficult to sympathise with people with this perspective, because at the end of the day, Hamas sent over hundreds of insurgent fighters, or terrorists if you will, to effectively paratroop into civilian areas of Israel to cause terror. To do nothing but cause terror. It is never even acknowledged by this side of the aisle whatsoever. If that was acknowledged and they'd at least say that's bad, I wouldn't have as much of an issue. I may have some sympathy with their point of view about Israel going into Gaza and flattening it, but at the end of the day, if you have a massive statement of war, and then you have a load of people all over the world celebrating it, which people like Jeremy Corbyn cast a blind eye to, people who aren't in Parliament but are still politically active actually actively agreed with, then yeah, I'm just going to assume you sympathise with terrorists, and I'm assuming you're sympathising with terrorists again after they've done basic terrorist action. But anyway, after the vote was done, there was another Palestinian demonstration in London that Zarah, Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn were involved in and made speeches, but we'll just go through Jeremy Corbyn's because they all end up saying the same thing.
Well, we're here protesting, and I'll tell you what, the more we protest, the more support we get. The more isolated those that support this become. That is what the nature of political action is about.
I mean, that is quite funny because over Jeremy Corbyn's life, he has probably been protesting about the same level throughout his whole life. Obviously, it only really ramped up 2017 to 2019, and then after that happened, it's dropped off a cliff again. So I don't know how true that necessarily is. But then again, an awful lot of climate protesting has made people pro-mad net zero, so maybe he is right to an extent. Then again, the results of that have been dire and people are mostly against it now, so who knows?
What you're doing today is a form of political action to encourage people over there to do the right thing, not the wrong thing. Don't go around banning people telling you the truth.
I mean, again, they're not being banned for the action of speaking in public like this. They're being banned for attacking RAF assets and attacking security guards and policemen.
Listen to the truth they're telling you and maybe just consider your own position and do something right and different, like standing up against genocide, standing up against crimes against humanity, standing up for the right of starving children to get food.
Yeah, but they're going beyond standing up and directly attacking British assets. Again, they weren't prescribed for attacking Israeli assets, you'll notice. They weren't even prescribed for attacking British police officers. No, they were prescribed for attacking British assets directly. A large reason for this is that, well, it wasn't as humiliating to have private security not able to keep a lockdown on their own factories and things like that. But when it comes to the RAF, yeah, highly embarrassing. A very, very high profile attack. Not so much when it comes to some Israeli arms manufacturer. Who cares? I mean, I did to an extent. I've been asking for them to be prescribed for some time, but, you know, it took till the RAF got attacked. Who would have thunk? You know, if you did what I asked, never would have been attacked.
We know which side we're on this. And our message to the rest of the world is, we are carrying on with our protests. We're going to be here as long as it takes. We're not going away. We're here with the people of Palestine.
And you get the idea with that. Jeremy Corbyn doing Jeremy Corbyn things. It's all quite tedious. One thing that I was most interested in, however, is that you'll have seen in some polls that there was a hypothetical polling for a Jeremy Corbyn party, and it was getting around 10% in the polls and splitting Labour. And he was actually asked directly about this on Robert Peston's show.
Jeremy, one of the things that there's been a lot of talk about is whether you will turn your alliance of MPs into a formal party and whether you're thinking of contesting the next election as a formal party. Where are you on that?
The alliance group of MPs, 5 of us, have worked very hard and very well together over the past year in Parliament, and we're coming up to our first anniversary.
So for those who don't know, Jeremy Corbyn's independent group of MPs are the 4 Gaza independents plus Jeremy Corbyn, obviously, after he got kicked out of the Labour Party. John McDonnell, obviously, is not formally part of the group, but I'd be shocked if they are not working together to some degree. But obviously, if you have a group of MPs who are all largely in line with each other, you expect them to make their own party, especially given that's more MPs than the Greens.
But there's some data that shows that if you did launch a party, you might do rather well.
Well, exactly. So next time we ask questions, ask about the alternative of a left independent party, of a socialist view that's being put.
So are you going to create one?
Let me finish.
I mean, yeah, to be fair, I just want him to get to the point. We're all a bunch of individuals in a group. Yeah, I know. I made these arguments 7 years ago.
You're so excited. You just want it to start, don't you?
We haven't got long. The reason I'm pushing is we haven't got long to the end of the
program. That's what it is. There's a lot of people all around the country in different independent groups. You look in Birmingham, look in Liverpool, look in Southport and so on. There is a thirst for an alternative view to be put. I'm working with all of those people. That grouping will come together. There will be an alternative view.
Now, I've heard this before, and it doesn't actually necessarily turn into a party. I'm, of course, talking about Rupert Lowe, who didn't so much make a party, but rather make Restore Britain, which effectively is a political movement, kind of a think tank, kind of a place to write policy or brainstorm policy, I guess. Whether what Jeremy Corbyn's talking about is going to turn into that or an actual party, it remains to be seen. Not being funny, I think if they pull their assets together, they could probably afford one.
And would you like to lead that group?
I'm here to work. I'm here to serve the people in the way I've always tried to do.
I mean, we've got this sort of thing from Farage for some years about the Brexit Party and Reform UK too. He's still come back and doing stronger than ever, so wouldn't shock me if Corbyn effectively tries to do the same thing for complete moronic leftists. But there we go, because those leftists that don't want to join the Greens effectively just think they're weak, but they see Corbyn effectively as this more strongman type figure. So yeah, that's what you're going to end up with. I mean, I hope he does it, not because I want another leftist party in the UK, but because it splits the vote even more and is an absolute gift to Farage and Reform, of course. And the more that they go on about Britain's enemies not being terrorists and people sabotaging our own RAF, the better I think it will be for the right again, because more and more people will realise that leftists are just full of absolute morons who absolutely love terrorists and enemies of Britain. So I love that they're so open about that. Anyway, that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover today. I do want to actually put one more funny thing out there. Given that tomorrow, I believe it's going to be tomorrow, supporting Palestine Action is actually going to land you a terrorist charge, there's every chance that we could see these MPs actually end up arrested if they don't stop saying things like "we are all Palestine Action" or "I support Palestine Action, stand by them." It'd be interesting to see how that goes down. But I think this is going to be one of those things that ends up being law and not very well enforced. But you never know, Labour has surprised me before, but usually for all the wrong reasons. But as I say, we'll have to wait and see on that. Right, that is everything I had for you for today. For Shilling, it's Subnautica tonight, and then it's also the usual next week with Tosh News, Subnautica on Thursday, and then, of course, Laughing at the Guardian Saturday. The Tosh News is on Tuesday, by the way, over on the Worcester Club. Videos out as and when I can make them. If you like what I do, please do subscribe, leave a like, and also leave a comment. Those are great ways to help me out in the algorithm. And if you think I deserve it, you can always throw a few quid my way by becoming a channel member or leaving super chats and super thanks. Right, with that, that's everything I had for you for today. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.